Fanthorpe, and I'll be your host today on this Friday. It's quite wet where I am, so I hope you guys are staying dry. So today we have a returning guest with an additional guest. So we're really excited to have Dan on again with his colleague Jess from Fergus, and we're going to be talking about 3 ways trade owners can price to win work. So that's going to be a really great topic for all of our tradies out there, making sure that we can grow our businesses and get a better idea of how we can approach things possibly in a different manner to increase our sales and make more money. And who doesn't want to do that? So we're streaming live on a number of platforms. So no matter where you are joining us from, you can partake in this session by using the comment section, the Q&A function, the chat function. We love to hear from you and make these sessions bespoke to your business. So do get your questions answered, pop them in the chat. I'll be floating throughout the platforms and checking them for your questions. So without further ado, Dan and Jess, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning. Good morning. You're looking great this morning too, by the way.
Both of you are too, and I'm loving this background as well. Super professional.
Hello.
We try. Morning, Jess.
Morning. How are we?
Good. Well, good morning, audience. Thank you for those tuning in. Shall I begin?
I think you shall. I will stop my video and just make sure everything's working on the back end.
Okay. Well, for those who are tuning in, thank you. I'll do 2 minutes on myself, and then I'll introduce Jess as well. So, as mentioned, I'm Dan Pollard, founder of Fergus. For those of you who don't know what Fergus is job management for tradies. And so it manages your office from coding, invoicing, scheduling, timesheets, back costing, all that sort of stuff. But how I got into that is an interesting story. I started as a plumber at 17 and started working myself at 22 and very quickly had a couple of staff. But I was one of those people who didn't know about taxes and had a huge tax bill at about 24, 60 grand 20 years ago, which is like $250,000 nowadays. And, that sort of destroyed me a bit. So I had to take a couple of years to pay that off and regather. And then went for myself again at 27 to 29, had a couple of staff again. But once again, the pressure of quoting, invoicing, scheduling, ordering, running jobs, just got too much again. And I stopped that and went away for a year and then came back at 30. And decided, heck, I kind of have to get my life together. And over the next 8 years, I built the third plumbing company to 25 staff and 2 branches through the 2008 recession. And also did 2 software startups. And Fergus now, I think we've got about 70 staff in 3 countries now.
Yep.
And so therefore, I often look at my life. It's in my 20s were filled with lots of learning and stress. Not the good kind. And then my 30s were two businesses that went very well because I got the hang of business. And so what I do most of my time now is spent talking to other people at what needs to be done to run a business successfully and grow. And that leads us to Jess. So Jess works is at Fergus in marketing, and she's here because she always asks great questions and has great insights. Because often I can forget what it's like to be a homeowner. Or not in the trades or not in business and gloss over things. So welcome, Jess.
Hi, Dan. Yeah, it's great. We've been seeing a lot of discussion recently around pricing. There's a lot happening in the marketplace, which makes this a really relevant topic today. So excited to join you, and I'll be playing the role of, as Dan said, sort of like the homeowner, but also the person who maybe doesn't understand the way a trades business runs, as well as Dan. And lots of learnings today.
Just checking, can you see my screen is shared, Jess?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so we're going to talk on these topics. But if you've ever seen me talk before, you know I always go a bit deep first on theories before I then talk about anything practical. So we're going to start the same way. We may not take up the whole hour because I'm always conscious to try and keep things a bit tight. So these are the sort of the 3 areas we're going to get through. But before we start that, we're going to even talk about before we even start to talk about pricing, we're going to talk about business principles. And the first business principles, this is what I got wrong in my 20s, was not knowing about gross profit, cash flow, and net profit. Like I just didn't know what gross profit actually is. Do you know what gross profit and gross margin is, Jess?
I have recently done a course which has enlightened me. So I'm getting there, but it's still work in progress, I would say.
And so when I discovered this, it was like a light bulb moment, like literally changed my entire life. Fergus, its entire financial system is built on this business principle. And for those who are listening, it's really important that if you haven't heard this before, it's important that you listen and get this, because it's all that matters. The most important line here is actually overheads. That's the most important line here, because your overheads are your fixed expenses per month that you can't get rid of, right? That's what you're locked in to pay. And so your gross profit is you need enough gross profit every month to pay your overheads. Like that's the aim of business. So your cost to sell, the labor and materials that you got to pay your tradies to work, well, that's kind of covered, because if they're working, you're charging, right? So you don't have to worry about really covering the cost of labor and materials, because there must be work for them to do. So that's covered. But they're the ones who generate the money, but they have to generate enough money to pay the overheads. And then the bit at the bottom is the net profit, right? Because if you're not making 10% net profit, then there's kind of no point being in business, right? For all the grief and stress. So here's the weird thing. If you haven't heard about it before, is what you do is you take the net profit you want, which should be about 10%, and you add it to your overheads, which is 30%, and that will give you a gross margin of 40%. And you go, well, what does that mean? Well, that means every quote and invoice you send out, you need a 40% margin. And you go, but hang on, what are my overheads? I don't know what they are as a percentage of my turnover. So what you do is you go to your accountant, or you go to your Xero, your accounting platform, and you look at what your last year's turnover and overheads are, and that will give you what your overheads are as a percentage of your turnover. And what happens in most businesses, your overheads don't change a lot from year to year, and your revenue and ability to earn money doesn't change that much from year to year unless you're expanding your business. And with a bit of help from your accountant, you can soon work out what your overheads are going to be as a percentage of your turnover. And as a general rule of thumb, you can always spend more money on overheads, right? You could always spend more money on health and safety, more money on marketing, more money on signs, uniforms, you name it. You could just spend more money. So once you accept that, you go, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to limit my overheads to 30%, because I'm going to make 40%, right? So I can make 40% gross margin, 30% overheads, so I can make 10% gross net profit. That's the way things want to work. Now you say, okay, well, but I want to make 20% net profit, and I only want to spend 20% on overheads. That doesn't really work in the real world, because you always need to spend money on overheads, right? Overheads aren't something that you can just magically wish that weren't going to be there. Office people want pay rises, you need more computers, you just need more stuff in your business, you always do. So the trick of business is going, okay, well, I'm going to limit my overheads and work to within a budget of 30% overheads, just going to cap it to that. I can't really get more than 10% net profit because there's competition. So if you're quoting and trying to get, 50% net profit, 30% overheads, 20% net profit, you'll find that your win rate will go down, right? Because if people are getting 2 or 3 prices, people generally take either the lowest or the second lowest quote, right? So if you've got too much net margin, net profit on your quoting system, then you won't win your quotes. And so therefore that is the market at work. So you hear about this thing called the market, that is the market. And so that's what constrains you. So the reason this is so important is if you know about this 40-30-10 principle, right? And you can always check with your accountant to get the exact numbers for your business. I'm not going to bring you back in a second, Jess. Is once you know about this principle, this means that every time you send out a quote or an invoice, you make sure that that quote has had a 40% margin. And so once you've got that, once you've understood what this gross margin overheads are as a percentage, you make sure you hit that, you'll always deliver your business a net profit. Now, Jess, that's an awful lot of information I've downloaded. Did that make sense to you?
Yep, it made sense to me.
Right. Any questions before I go on to the next slide?
No, but I'm intrigued now to learn how this all links in with the pricing discussion and how you get started.
Yes, well, that comes into like discounting and margins and being okay to walk away from stuff, because you have to be okay to walk away from a quote once you've given it. because as we talk about, we'll come back to lowest value if we don't get onto it later on. Right, so this is the next key things we want to look at in your business, which is the whole point of being in business is to make profit, right? That's the whole point. So, but there's two parts of a business that make it really, really stressful. One is cash flow. Like without cash flow, your business is super stressful. So we can only have cash flow when we're invoicing properly, right? But these two metrics, these are both in zero, is days to get paid by property owner. So we want to be on what's called like a 30-day cash flow cycle on average. So that means we want to have most of our invoices being paid around 30 days. So if you look at, like my business plumbing company used to be 78 days to get paid until we focused on ways to bring this down, right? But what it tells you is how much is sort of wrong with the customer experience. Because if your customer is happy with the invoice, then they will pay, right? So generally speaking, people aren't paying invoices because they're not happy with the invoice, right? So there's normally a dispute, normally around price, sometimes quality, but normally price. So what that tells me is that your business might be doing a lot of charge up, and it's not managing price expectation very well, and so therefore owners are getting bills they're not expecting, or you haven't just talked about when you expect to get paid. So property owners are getting all of these bills that are way outside expectation. They're not paying you. You then call them and you have to discount and credit and negotiate to try and get paid. But all that just takes time and is stressful. So what pricing and quoting does is it alleviates the worst of these not getting paid issues, because customers now know what they're expecting to pay. And once you get onto talking about pricing all the time, you'll find your cash flow improves dramatically, because if people know what they're supposed to pay, then they pay. Generally speaking, they're very good. No, I had 25 staff, don't forget. I think our bad debts per year were 0.2%, right? 0.2%. People are very good at paying. It's very rare to get a rogue that's just not going to pay you. It does happen, but it's quite rare. And the other one is days to pay your bills. It's how long does it take to pay your bills? Now, the big thing here is, let's say your average days to get paid are 30 days. Like, let's say you've got your cash flow sorted, it's 30 days, but you're taking 60 days to pay your bills. What that tells me is that you're not making enough gross profit in your business, right? That's telling me that you're not very profitable, right? You may have your operational business under control, but you haven't worked out how to be efficient with your workforce and your materials, and your jobs are always sort of going over budget and you're making less net profit than you should. So, okay, well, why are we not making enough gross profit? That's a conversation for another day. I think we've got talks on that somewhere, haven't we, Jess, on labour and materials, where money leaks out from not making money on your quotes. But that's still these are the two key metrics you need to look at if you want to understand, does this, am I running a good business? Do I know how to run a good business? Because once you know how to run a business, both these figures should come down to around 30 days each, right? Because as soon as you get paid around 30 days, you pay your bills and you're always on time. So a lot of variables in this, but hopefully...
And just on the 30 days, is that a standard time frame that trades businesses should aim for, or is there situations where you would shorten that or lengthen it?
On averages, because you might have some, I call them cash and carry jobs, but they're pretty rare. That's where you do maintenance jobs. As I think I was telling you before, the worst job is your one-off retail maintenance job, fixing a tap or a light switch for a new customer. That's like the worst job going. What you want are your bigger renovation jobs and your bigger full-day jobs, right, where guys can stay all day on site. And typically most workforces, 60 to 80% of their work is repeat business. And so therefore, once you're doing repeat work for someone, most people are going to pay within 2 weeks. But at least half your work will be for businesses who still by and large pay around the 20th, 25th of the month. And you just always end up on about a 30-day cash flow cycle. That's just the way it rolls. Obviously, there's big commercial, big industrial are different, but most tradies are not. Especially our audiences are not hardcore, full-on industrial commercial clients on these big contract payments. So most tradies are, as our stats show, under 5 and just doing a variety of work.
Yeah, awesome.
Good question though. Right, so that's the theory around what we're trying out of the way, hopefully. Right, so coming back onto why price. With a great risk comes great reward. And is that true with quoted work in construction? That's actually kind of not true. So, because it's very rare that a home property owner will take one uncontested quote. You ever let any tradies just come in, you take the first quote, don't get second or third quotes?
No, I'd typically get a minimum of 3 quotes.
And what quote do you normally choose in terms of like how do you decide which quote's going to win?
Honestly, I go off impression and experience and price. So they would be my criteria that I look for.
But how often do you take the highest price?
No, I don't think I'd ever take the highest price.
And take the lowest price?
I only if the experience was as good as the next one up.
Yeah, and that's like that research has been shown for years that people will, if you got 5 quotes, people will normally take the second lowest price.
Yeah.
They don't take the middle; they take the second lowest price. It's very, and but the important part was there. Even if the top guy had the best fan, had the most experience, looked really good, still not enough if he's too expensive.
I can imagine if you're maybe working in quite a niche or a higher value space that might not always be the case, but I would assume for the cost conscious consumer like myself.
See, that's what you think. Oh, when we come to that slide, I think it's near the end. We will teach everyone how to get around that.
Okay.
Right. So, but the benefits of quoting is like you can lock in some good big jobs, right? So if you're sick and tired of being 3 or 4 people, like it's really nice when you start getting like 10, 12 guys, but you start having jobs that go on for weeks. Like that's nice because then you don't have to worry about guys. And honestly, when you start learning to quote and price, the payment disputes go away. Right? People just being grumpy about the price, that just goes away because everyone knows what's going on. Normally, there's a clear roadmap because normally there's a plan, and therefore you get good cash flow. But the con is you can lose a lot of money, right? And you lose money by not managing the labour and materials properly. Like you can lose a lot. And there's that weird thing that homeowners would like it if you lost money, because then they want to know that it's weird, right? Because it's like employees hate it knowing that you're making money off them, and homeowners hate it when they know that you're making good money off them. So it's kind of that weird thing you have to always be managing. But so charge ups are good, right? Because you can make good profit, and in some ways it's easier to manage because you don't have to worry about ordering materials, you don't have to worry about really scheduling your labour, you don't have to worry about being organised. It's not your problem because you're charging every hour. But the con is the grumpy customer with cost overruns. And then you end up in steep discounting and poor cash flow. And so what happens is if you can't get off the charge up cycle, you basically will never grow a big business. That's the short of it. Any questions on there, Jess? Especially as a homeowner.
Yeah, I guess especially around the quoting and losing money. I think this year, especially, the feedback we're hearing is there's a lot of uncertainty in the market around supplies and managing materials and also pricing. So pricing is fluctuating quite a bit. So I'm keen to for your thoughts on how the tradies can protect themselves a little bit more when it comes to quoting. And yeah, it's
true. For those who don't know, like your electrical prices have gone up 40%, spiking at the moment. That's true. In your terms of trade, you're going to have to put the clause in to be able to pass on unexpected economic price rises that are outside the scope. Yeah, that's difficult actually. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, this is a difficult time actually. Unfortunately, this is where contract law becomes very difficult.
I think, you continue.
Well, these means that your terms and conditions have to start getting really, really tight to allow all these things in. So I'm about to get some scaffolding done at home, or was, it's on break for COVID. And I've just emailed the guy and said, when it's up, I've got to pay $300 rental for it. And I'm going to get the contract amended. So if there's another COVID lockdown, I'm not paying rental because of COVID, because that's outside of my control. And he's not happy about that, because it's like, well, it's not my fault. I was like, yep, it's not my fault. And I'm not going to go with him if he's not going to put that in the contract.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And so it's going to swing both ways.
The other thing that I've noticed as a homeowner is when I get a quote for something, it will be valid for a certain amount of time. I quite often will take longer than that amount of time to decide who I'm going to go with, especially if it's not an urgent job. So I guess that's another area where communication and letting people know that this, this cutoff date is a cutoff date, and sticking to that. Because
but do you think as a homeowner, most people, you believe that cutoff date is real?
Well, no, I don't believe it. So that's why I think the communication, and I would still expect that after that cutoff date that price would still be valid. But I think in the market at the moment, that is a misconception.
There's a difference in that. So every quote should only be valid for 30 days, right? But even in your terms and conditions, when you send the quotes, you need to have the right to adjust the quote for excessive inflation. But that would so it's got to be in the terms of trade when you send the quote, that you have the right to cancel the quote and resubmit it with new price rises up to, you might have to say, 3 days before the work has begun. Right? So that means both parties have the right to cancel the quote because of that, because the problem now is that notice came out is that because COVID's now a known thing, it's now not going to become a acceptable excuse to justify why contracts overrun, because it's now a known thing. So you have to watch out for that for any contracts that you are giving or sending now, because COVID is a known thing. So it's now no longer unforeseeable. And that's another risk, actually, because it's going to be around for another 2 years. So people are going to say, well, this was a known risk. I'm not going to share that risk with you. So yeah, you are going to update your terms of trade. That's a good point.
And I think it's very well to update the terms of trade, but how often do you think the end customers reading those terms of trade very thoroughly? So I think just taking the extra minute to say, hey, look, this is pricing based off of this week's prices, and that may change.
You don't actually have to do that, because because in New Zealand and Australia you have things like the Consumer Guarantees Act and the Fair Trading Act, and so if you give a customer a document with your terms and conditions, the customer is by law supposed to read those. Now,
I'm thinking more on a goodwill, but
what the CGA because what the CGA and FTA do is they're now worded around this theory of goodwill or customer outcomes. And so if those clauses are in there and they're not punitive and they're reasonable, then they're upheld.
Yeah.
Because it's just common sense, right? Those are not unpunitive, unfair terms. So, and the thing is, if you're dealing with a customer who's going to get so pedantic and terrible like that, you're better off not having that customer in the first place.
This is true.
Do you know what I mean? And this is the one thing, like, you soon learn about when you've been in business for a long time. It's like, man, if this person's difficult before I've even started working for them, I do not want to work for them. Like, you can't be afraid to walk away from difficult people at the start. I
guess it's how you frame it as well, though, as it could be a way to help speed up the acceptance of the quote, if you say.
Well, that's a different. So this is well, perhaps we'll start there first, because that was at the last slide. It was called good, better, or best.
Oh, right.
Okay, we'll jump around, because I think you may be right. You might be. We'll come back to it. Okay, so winning work. And so one of the things that was asked was the strategy about sort of giving sort of 3 prices to the customer. You could give this is a good thing you could do, this is the better option, and this is the best option. And I quite fundamentally disagree with that approach, because what you should be doing is doing what's called discovery with this outcome. It's like, okay, what if that property owner has a rental property they're selling? So, or there's a new tenant moving on the weekend, And so the outcome, let's say there's that tap is broken in the kitchen. So the outcome that that customer wants is that that tap is fixed by 4:30 by Friday, and they don't want to spend more than $400. Now they don't want to put in $1,000 kitchen tap, right? That's not what they want. And so Jess, so let's come back to theoretically, if I'm selling to you, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of win rates, you should only be trying to win about 50% of your quotes. So if you're winning 100% of your quotes, you're too cheap. If you're winning 10% of your quotes, expensive. So you should be aiming to win around about 50%. 40 to 60 is the average range, right? Okay, but when you're at the homeowners, there's this thing called discovery, which is like talking to Jess and going, okay, well, what's your budget and what are you actually trying to achieve? And explain to the customer, okay, around this whole time, cost, quality, outcome, right? I think we've talked a lot about the construction triangle. In fact, every project has, the shortest time, the lowest cost, the highest quality is what everyone's trying to achieve. And the old saying is you can have any two, but never all three. And so the job of when you're actually selling is how do you find that center point of balancing off this time, cost, quality, occasion, whatever it's called. And so when I'm talking to Jess as the homeowner, my job is to really talk to her to find out exactly what she's trying to achieve with this job. So that when I deliver my quote, I've already pretty much got the pre-acceptance because she knows I've actually listened to her and have delivered my quote that's met her needs of what she's trying to achieve for her outcome. And that's going to give me the best chance of actually winning that work. So, because that would be my point to you, Jess, when you get people at home, if someone actually spend the time to uncover this time, cost, quality problem, delivers you that quote, and I'm not the most expensive, but I'm more, a bit more expensive. I know it's confirmation bias, but are you more likely to go with the person who's actually understood your needs more, or still going to be more price driven?
I think it would depend on the job. We recently had our bathrooms renovated, and in that scenario, it was definitely, like you were saying, we wanted someone who could do what we needed done and keep within our budget. And we did find someone that met that criteria, and they weren't the lowest bidder. So, but yeah, if it was something a little less trivial that we didn't care as much about, then potentially would be more cost driven.
But see, that's the point. That's the point of discovery, right? Is finding out from the customer what's actually important to them. Now, the reason I talk about this a lot is, like, it shocked me how many tradespeople are only prepared to do the best quality work and only put in like really expensive taps for people. And I'm like, but that's not what they want. It's a rental. They're selling. The solo parents, they're retired. They're like, nah, this is the best. That's what I'm going to do. And it's like, but it's not what you want. It's what can they afford? What are they trying to achieve? Now, you can recommend options, but you need to understand where they're coming from, because what happens then is, you'll win the work a lot quicker. That's right, a lot easier. But when you send the invoice, you're going to get paid because you've delivered the outcome that you've agreed to. And that's the whole point about when you start getting into this journey of learning to price everything. So we'll go back a bit to say what's important. Do I have a slide in here? Oh, where's my slide on how much money? When you've got five, so when you've got, say, 5 to 7 staff, you have a wage bill of now 10 grand a week, like 10 grand a week. So, when I had 25 staff, what was our wage? I think our wage bill was 40 grand a week, just wage bill. And we had 50 grand a week. There was always 10 grand worth of expenses a week. Now that's frightening. Like, imagine paying $40,000 a week in wages every single week. That wage bill's coming up. Let alone then you've got your GST bills coming up and your tax bills and your overheads and your suppliers. I mean, that is frightening. So there is no way you can run a business like that on charge up. So what you have to do is you have to start pricing every job, right? Because you need to start working out how to get paid as quickly as possible after every job. And the way to get paid as quickly as possible after every job is that you start pricing every job and doing what I call managing expectations. Because so the key to business, to growing a successful business, is those two words, I mean, these are the two words I would get tattooed on every business's hand. So he looks at it every day and he goes, oh, manage expectations. So your job as business owner is to manage the expectations of your staff and of your property owners. And so what that means is at the quoting stage, you start figuring out exactly what the property owner is trying to achieve, right? And then that is when the price is accepted, that is clearly written down in the job cards. So the trade person that is on site, they're delivering that outcome, right? Because that's how you get paid, get good cash flow. Welcome back.
Thanks. I've been hanging in the back, just
screen.
absorbing all the knowledge and just making sure we don't have any questions. But I just, whenever I listen to you talk, because the last time you came on, you were talking about tools for tradies and like bringing tradies into a more digital space because, you know, and how you do that. And what I've noticed about the way that you move forward in business, it's all about the details. It's all about setting people up for success, isn't it? It's like, you know, it's thinking, problem shooting, everything that could kind of possibly go wrong or everything that is in the background that happens and making sure that that's all in place so everyone feels well taken care of and knows what's happening. And that's what I love about what you bring to these sessions is that you just nut it out and remind us that all of those elements are what make an experience or a sale happen. Yeah, so it's so good.
Yeah, that's right. I get quite forthright sometimes. Sorry about that, but it's
I love it. Like when you were talking in your last session, you were chatting about how, you know, just making sure the training's there, making sure all of that stuff is there. And I just found it so valuable. So those of you that are tuning in, if you didn't catch Dan's last session, it was filled with business insights on how to transition your staff to a more digital platform and ways to do it so that like everybody feels really supported and no one feels overwhelmed with that. And there was so many golden nuggets in that talk. Like I'm actually like selling it short with that. So I'm going to go and find the link and I'm going to pop it in the chat for everybody. Yeah. And I'll let you keep on rolling on your train.
Have we got 13 more minutes or to the hour?
Yeah. No, you can go as long as, we've got till the hour, but usually, you know, we like an organic finish. We don't need to be like to the note, you know, here we kind of roll until we're like, okay, and we're done today.
Yeah, good. Okay, good. Right. Okay, so Jess, any questions on that about managing expectations? Like, does it actually make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it absolutely makes sense. And it's a really good place to start. Yeah, I guess I'm keen for you to tell us a little bit more around obviously one of the cons of quoting, which we're saying is really good if you're wanting to win more work, be a bit more sure about your incoming cash and getting a little bit more strategic about how you're running your business. So if one of the cons of quoting is that you're losing money, like what are the ways that you can counteract that and take a bit more control of that?
Yeah. So like, as I talked about, just touched on, right? When you start having a wage bill of 10 grand a week coming in, right, it's 40 grand a month. That's just wage bills. That actually gets to be a staggering amount of money, right? Like it starts getting quite scary. But it's also difficult if you just always stay at 3 staff, right? 3 to 5 tradies is also difficult because there's this magical number. You need around 7 or 8 sort of vans on the road to have 2 full-time office people and yourself, because then that gives you enough people earning money that you don't have to work full-time, and there's enough office resources to take away the stress that the extra people are bringing. Because, you know, when you start employing a few people, the paperwork they generate starts getting more than you and your partner can handle. But you need that sort of 5 to 6 vans on the road full-time to justify 2 full-time in the office to make it all sort of worthwhile, right? So getting to that point is very difficult because you've got to transition from, you know, sort of 3 people running it from your home, just you and your partner working every other day, getting super stressed, but it's kind of profitable when it's working, to like 5 to 6 people. You need kind of a dedicated office staff an office, it's a completely different beast, that transition, and it's really hard to manage. And then, but it's cash flow which will kill you. It's always cash flow. The stress that you can't cope with is not paying your bills. So then you need to start pricing, but you haven't got enough office staff, so you're not very organized. So then your quotes don't come in on time, because you're like, well, what's going on? And what happens is, the two things is, there's the quoting the work in the first place, and then there's managing the jobs to come in on budget, right? So when you quote, you have to start learning to quote lowest value. And what this is, like, no one's going to be as efficient as you as the business owner, right? That's just, no one's going to be as efficient as you. But you need to set your business up so that they can be as close to you as possible in efficiency. And so that means that you have to learn to get materials delivered to site for your quoted work. You can't have them going to the suppliers in the morning, right? Because let's say it's a bathroom renovation and you've allowed 8 hours for whatever, the pre-wire or pre-line. So if they have to go to the suppliers at 7:15 in the morning to get the materials, they do that. Say they're efficient and leave there at 10 to 8. They're still getting stuck in traffic. They're there at 8:30, 8:45, right? Realistically, they go to the merchant at 7:30, muck around 8:30, getting stuck in school traffic, get to site 9:30. That's pretty common, man. So you've now lost an hour and a half in the morning getting materials, right? And then they start working, and then they work till about 3:30, and then you call them off to fix a real estate job on the way home, a PowerPoint, whatever, toilet system's leaking, right? So the on-site work they were doing was now 9:30 to 3 o'clock. So they've only actually done, 5 hours of effective work? And you wonder why your quoted jobs don't come in on time. What they have to do is they have to be on site by 7:30, and the materials turn up, and they work to 5 o'clock, and you don't call them off, right? So now you're getting this 8-9 hours productive work on site, and you do that every single time, and you make sure that the same person goes back to the job to finish it off, and so they get full days to knock it off, and that's how you bring your quotes in on budget. And because the materials are getting delivered, you're not overbuying your materials. Now, what that will give you is the peace of mind when you're quoting. So now we'll come back to the start. So now I'm quoting, right? So when you quote the job, you've got to quote your hours accurately, right? Then you've got to break it down. So when the guys get the job card, they know they've got 3 hours for demolition, whatever, 12 hours for the pre-line, pre-wire, and then they've got 6 hours for the fit off, right? So you've got 3 visits. Cool. Now, say you win the work, you've now got to be firm with the customer that you're only coming when you can do these full chunks of work. Because, we all know when we're doing a big reno that the customer would love for you to come and do a little bit here and a little bit there to try and get the whole job tracking on, because they want to keep the house running. Well, that's good for them, but not good for you unless you quoted that. So you have to be really firm up front when you're quoting, delivering the quote, that you specify the number of site visits that you're going to go. And if you have to go more, then you're going to charge for these extra site visits because they're not allowed. So this does mean you have to be all over that quote. You have to be all over it. And then I had these red folders I would deliver to the customers, and in it would be what I needed from them. And so they had to put in there the specifications of the heated towel rail, of the vanity, of the toilet, of the shower, of the mixers. But they have to have the shower tray and the shower mixer on site so I can do my job, right? So I can come in and bang it out and move on. I'm not waiting to get the specs, so this is about managing the job, right? Because the customers don't know, and they haven't done bathroom renovations before, kitchen renovations before. They don't know what you need. It's up to you as a business owner to tell the customer what you need so that the tradies on site can do the job and knock it out, right? Because if they haven't got the plans on site, how can they set the pipes and cables and switches all at the right height first time to do the job and knock and get out? They can't. So therefore, you have to have some mechanism on site that the customer knows what they need to give you so the tradie on site can do the job, right? So what about managing expectations?
And a lot of what I'm hearing is actually communication between yourself and the homeowner.
Yeah, because I think it's important to know, so I've been a tradie for 25 years, right? I still virtually know nothing about cars. I have no interest in cars. I have no idea how long it will take to change the brakes, or I've got no idea. I've actually got no idea how long it would take or what it will cost. I mean, what would it cost to change the gearbox or shocks or springs? I have no idea. And it's amazing how many tradies forget that the customer has no idea, like no idea. And they don't really care, right? I don't really care. It's just like, tell me the best brakes for my situation, give me a budget, cool, and I'll trust you that you'll do that. And that's all I want to know. And the same about that trades are better for getting the customers. They don't really care what pipe you use or what cable you use. It's just like, yeah, will it be good? Will it work? Will it be great?
That brings me to an interesting point you made the other day, Dan, when we were talking about, especially, so in the first slide, we were talking about wanting to achieve, say, a 40% margin on each job to meet our gross profit requirements. So I guess there's two ways that you can make that margin when you're pricing. So you're either having obviously a higher charge out rate than what you pay wages for your staff, but then there's the materials piece. So and you made an interesting point that while consumers don't understand a lot, the internet and things, when it comes to materials, is quite anyone can Google vanity unit specs I need to see kind of a market price. So how do you overcome that, and how do you meet that 40% margin with an uninformed but they're informed consumer?
Yeah, there's two parts to this. Okay, so coming back to lowest value, so I'm setting the stage right for lowest value. So lowest value is, when you're talking pricing, you're going to exclude the high cost items, right? Because you can't make a 40% margin on the vanity units and the toilet, right? So all the heated towel rail and all the expensive stuff. So we'll park it to one side. So when you're giving the quote to the customer, you want to try and win the work, right? You've spent the right time on discovery with the customers. So you've made sure that your quote is actually going to be what you've discussed. Now, you've got to make sure you quote that exactly, and then you make sure that your margin on that quote is 40%. Right, that's the deal. Overall, the blend on labour and materials, the margin has to be 40%, because you know your overheads are 30%. You know you'll make a 10% net profit. You now know, because you know you're managing your labour. You know you've got systems in control to get the guys on site, the materials delivered, and you leave them on site all day. You know that you can't do any more to bring these jobs in on time, on budget, right? You know. Because once you get good at quoting and you have systems in place, you know, right? You know you can bring stuff in on time, budget. And this is when you start knowing that you're in business, because you know how to bring stuff in on time, on budget. But you also now know you cannot discount that quote anymore. You now know you have given the lowest value to that customer. And if they can't accept it, you have to walk away. Right? Does that make sense, Jess? In terms of like, this is how you start getting confident that you can rest assured walk away from that job. Because like I say, whatever, comes up at 2,300. And you say to me, I've had a quote for 2,100. Can you match it?
Yeah.
Right?
I think that would happen quite a lot.
Yeah. And you've got a decision to make, because you know, right? You now know, heck, that means I'm going to make a 5% net profit if I do that. And if you're super busy, you say, no, I'll walk away. So what if you're not busy? Right? And this is the conundrum, right? What if you're not busy? If it's that close, then you're going to suck it up, buttercup, and you're going to take the job and do it for that. And that's life, right? And so, but if there's a huge margin difference, this is when you have to come back to the customer and negotiate and try and find a way to cut the scope of work to try and reduce the cost, right? Which is back again.
I've got a question, and I know you want them at the end. No, I just had a question about that because I think it applies to every sector as well. Taking on a like quoting something and then going below the cost that you were going to go. A lot of folks have an issue where they're worried that that's then going to affect the value of their work on future jobs because they've now quoted themselves at this price and now they're known for that price. Do you feel like that applies in this area?
No, your issue though is you're going to impact your cash flow and gross profit. That is always the issue. And so then you get into what people try and do then, and it's a pretty common tactic. And I must say, I have done it and for a long time, which is you go, okay, fine. But if you want to play that game, so there's a quote I love, which is, I'll pay you what you want if you do what I want, right?
Right.
So if you want to play that game with me of trying to screw me on price, I know how to play that game with you. And all I'll do is I'll manufacture extras on the job and charge you more up front, right? And so this is another way you can say to the customer, it's like, okay, if you want to play that game, we can do that. You say a bit nicer than this, but you say, there's no room in this quote for me to have any extras, anything outside of scope, I'm going to charge you for, because I have no wiggle room. Right? And so you make them aware of that's the repercussion of doing that. You say, for this is an all no extras guaranteed, right? But if you want this price, that's fine, I'll match that, but that means I have no wiggle room.
Right.
And that's where it comes down to. But you're always trading off the next job versus this job with the customer. And it's important to, like, it's always a fine trade-off. And this is why you've really got to have, like, the bosses still always have to be over it, because you can share the sheep, but you can't fleece the sheep, right? And so you do want to come back again and again with the customer and try and get more work. But you have to look at the economy. Are we in expansion or contraction mode? Like right now, man, I've never seen such a weird economic time that we're super busy, yet there's no work because you can't do it. So it's like super weird. And if someone's a good customer, and they've got a good job, maybe not as profitable, but they'll have more work, you might have to do things for a slightly less margin and take it. And so this is where financial oversight of your business starts becoming really critical. You have to get right over your numbers. And so you need to know what your operating overheads are. Like, you need to know those, right? And so you need to talk to your accountant to make sure you have this number pinned down exactly what your overheads are per month, so that you know exactly when you're quoting that you cannot go below this margin, right? Because if you don't know what that margin is, how on earth can you know where it is? Like, this is something that's still I'm bewildered. So you say, yeah, but the market's charging, $1,000 a point. But who cares?
Right.
What if your business requires $1,200 to break even because you've got these big overheads? Like, who cares what the market's charging? It's like, what does your business need? Now that will then lead to the next question, which is, are my overheads too high? Like, literally, right? And if they are, then literally, okay, you go, well, I've got to cut my overheads, I've got to cut my staff, I've got to reduce my overheads to meet the market price point. And that's a legitimate question. But if you don't know how to work the day, and don't have it, then you have to get independent help from accountants who know how to work this out for you. So you cannot meet, just because the market's charging this, you cannot meet that unless you know why and how. Right? If you know why and how, then cool. And now if you're going to buck the trend, which is unusual, right? It's like that old saying, the fight doesn't always go to the bigger man, the race doesn't always go to the fastest man, but it sure is the way to bet, right? Right.
You've always got some good quotes.
Yeah. So if the price point, like the price point in the market is $2,400 for a hot water cylinder, right? That's the price point in the market. So if that's below your price point, say it costs you $2,400 and you've got to charge $2,800, like, you're not going to get the work. So what is going wrong in your business that you can't meet that price point? And that's an interesting question to ask yourself. And then you come back to the point as well, okay, so as Jess mentioned before, I want to go niche. Well, that's a great place to go, right? So how can you start getting into other bits of work that you can earn good margin? Like, one of the areas that we ended up doing work on was water play for preschools. We ended up doing all these cool little water features and interactive things in preschools. But it just sort of, one job popped up and we did it and we got referred. And that was great profit margin in those little jobs. It was very niche.
Yep.
And those are the areas when you've been in the business for a long time, is how can I specialize into these other areas to try and get these margins and get off this sort of bulk buying sort of type of business. Like, it's okay if you want to be like a supermarket and just churn out hot water cylinders or churn out apartments. That's fine, but at least make it your choice, because you know what you're doing. It's like, it's your choice rather than just responding to the market as always.
That's great advice, because I think it's a common thing that I also hear in the digital space in general, is that know your numbers, and really decide who you are. And, like, drive your business instead of letting your business drive you, which I think is what you're essentially saying there.
Yeah. And it's hard, right? Like, it's not going to happen overnight. Like I'm now such a big proponent of people getting business mentoring advice and signing up to these training programs. The changes I've seen in 6 to 9 months when they sign up to these business coaching is phenomenal. Like you're talking a 2 to 3 year journey by yourself trying to work it out versus 6 to 9 months through getting proper coaching around knowing how to do these things.
I've literally never heard, oh, sorry, Dan. I've never heard, like, everybody that I listen to on podcasts or, that are really driven or are quite successful, they always say they have a coach or a mentor. And I think, like, some folks are like, oh, I don't want to invest in that. It's like extra money I've got to invest in. And I guess, like, I'm starting to change my mind around it as well and going, are you a hobbyist or are you a business owner? Do you believe in yourself that you could get somewhere? Yeah. Or do you feel like, are you too, like, is it fear that's stopping you from your own success almost? Really? How much of that is really what's going on behind not wanting to get the support, because the support means you have to be accountable, doesn't it? And
well, it's also, I mean, my 20s were marred by just not knowing. I truly didn't know that business was a science. I truly didn't realize that it was all worked out. Like, you can go to university for 10 years and do business degrees for 10 years. I think that was my
Professor
big
Dan. That's what we're calling you now.
I think it's a common theme though, right, Dan? You have a famous quote that I like to share, which is, tradies do apprenticeships, they don't do business ships. And
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Getting your head around the business side of running a business is hard work. So
it is and it isn't, right, mate. If you've seen the tools that some of these guys operate now, mate, these things are flash, man. And, like, if any tradie thinks he can't run a business, it's like, nah, dude, I've seen the tools you use, you'll be fine. Yep. There's definitely some business principles you have to get. The first one is gross margin as a business model.
Now, one of the things, you've got a good slide on this, Dan, which I thought would be really good to cover as well, is just, and it relates back to the materials piece, and that's around the difference between your markup and your margin. Because I think this is something that I know I've struggled with in the past understanding, so it would be quite good to hear you kind of talk through this one. Yeah,
this is great. Right. Top row, cost, markup, sale price, margin.
You've got about 3 minutes.
No, she said we can run on. Right. If something costs you $50, you mark it up 100%. You've doubled the price to $100. But your margin on the sale price is only 50%. Right? So you mark things up to get to your margin. Now, why is this important? Right. So if we go to the column below, because you touched on frontal wall fixtures, right? You can't make 50% margin on frontal wall fixtures, but you can make 100% margin on screws. So you can mark up your screws by 100%. You can mark up your cable by 20 or 30%. Fittings, switches, you can mark those things up by 80%. Remember, if it's marked up, it's only half the margin, right? So you can mark up different materials to try and achieve the desired margin, because you can't do the same markup on all the different things. And so this is why we have these two terms, because you mark stuff up on the cost price to try and achieve a desired average margin. And so this is why it's important to know these different things. Now, the margin of 40%, that generally only applies to your everyday bits and pieces you're buying, right? So in your quoting, you cannot put 40% margin on all the expensive items, right? Those are 3 to 5% because the customer can win the work. Now, the other thing is, I generally advocate for tradies not to buy those things, because then they take the warranty for them. And so the showers, the bars, the taps, the toilets, the switches, the heated towel rails, all those light fittings, if you as the tradie business owner supply those things, you now take the warranty for those. So I say don't do that. Get the customer to buy them, because sure as chickens have eggs, about 5% of those things you buy, they will have a manufacturing issue, and then the customer's calling you and you've got to sort it out. And for the 3 to 5% margin you make on that, it's not worth the time you spend trying to sort out those warranty issues, because there's always some manufacturing defects. Not worth it. Now, did I
It's really
explain?
interesting. I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah, I know. Did I explain that clearly, do you think?
Yeah, I think you did. I guess um, if I was a listener now, I'd be thinking, oh, how can I do this? And if you're using like Excel or something, there's probably formulas that you can come up with. But Dan actually did show me the other day in Fergus. We do it for you. So if you
Yeah. I don't
a
sell
little
Fergus.
moment to give a wee plug, but yeah, if you are building a quote in Fergus, there's this handy little drop down which I actually didn't know was there, which you can play around with the markups on the various materials that you've got in your quote to achieve that desired margin, and it does all the calculations for you. So save the head hurting a little bit.
Yeah, it's a bit more sophisticated than that. It already has default markups on the different types of products like this. So the screws already have high margins, and it's a good algorithm that does this automatically for you. So yeah, there's a lot going on there, but that's another video to watch for another day for people. So yeah, but all of the starts is once you know what your gross margin needs to be as a business to meet your overheads, then you're gold, right? Now there's some more layers to move to as you get more experience, but I found for most people, very few trade businesses actually understand gross margin really well. Some absolutely do, but it's been my experience that 90% of tradies do not understand gross margin well. Most businesses don't understand it well. And so first off, there's things we go around budgeting and forecasting, but those are the next layers once you get past gross margin. So I hope this is triggering some deep thoughts into you. And hopefully, tell me if I've got it right, Jess, hopefully what I'm conveying is you need to know gross margin is your number one thing for everything in your business. Then when you quote, you know what that margin is, so you know you can't discount. Because you've got that fixed price, you now know you have to work to that margin. So you've got to work your labor and materials to come in under that gross margin, right? And if you do that, then you've won the work. Then you have to manage the work. But if you've done that really well, the customer will have a good experience, and then you'll get paid, and you'll have cash flow. Right?
Yeah.
Have I explained that, Luke, well?
I think so. And I think at the end of the day, it's all around peace of mind. So if you know that every quote or every price you're putting out in the market is going to cover your costs, and once you get comfortable with that idea of that, sometimes you might have to just walk away. I think they're the big takeouts for me, and hopefully for those listening, is peace of mind. Brilliant.
Like for those, like honestly, we were doing 6,000 jobs a year, right? 6,000 jobs a year. There was virtually not a job we would do without either an estimate, just a verbal from maintenance job. Virtually nothing was ever done on charge up anymore, because you just can't afford the dispute. You just cannot afford to not get paid. And so you're just talking about money the whole time. But why not? Like, why not? If it's going over budget, why not talk to the customer and just start talking about money? Why it's going bad? What can you do? Can we change it? Bring it back? And then you got cash flow. And so we've got 2 minutes. Discounting? No, never. No, never.
There's actually, if you Google, there's a really interesting matrix. Just Google discounting matrix, and it will show you what, if your current margin is this and you discount by this much, what the impact on your margin actually is. And it's a lot bigger than what you think. So I'd encourage everyone to have a look at that and actually understand the end result of, like, even a minor discount on what it does to your bottom line.
Well, you can't if you're only making a 10% gross profit or 10% net profit, and then you've given a 10% discount to win the job, you're going to work for nothing.
Yeah.
And that's best case scenario, right? Like, because if you work to that lowest value quote, so to win the work, you've got no wiggle room. You can't discount, and you have to manage the jobs really well to come in on budget.
One final question for you, Dan. Obviously, that pricing takes quite a bit of time, and it's a lot of effort. And like you say, as the tradie, you understand it the most. Sometimes you're going to have to get an admin person to understand that. But this whole time element, like, would you ever consider charging for quoting?
No, it's not. But you should, because if you do the discovery phone call quite correctly, like, I know what it's going to cost, right? like, man, after 20 years of doing a job, if you don't know in your bones what stuff has cost, what is wrong?
Yeah.
Like, as soon as I talk to a customer, they want a bathroom renovation. I'm like, yeah, man, bathroom renovations always cost, like, my bit is going to cost $4,500. It's not less. Where's your budget at? And if they're like, oh man, I was thinking like $1,500, you're like, no, we're so far apart. Like, you've got to get better on that phone call and that discovery and not wasting your time quoting a job where there was no budget in the first place. And so you've got to get smart. Like, yeah, and just if you start talking about money up front on the discovery phase on the phone call, you start working out where their budgets are at. Because because bathroom renovations are costing, $20,000 nowadays, 20 to 30 grand, right? Pretty standard.
Yeah.
And so if you start talking to a customer and to get their overall budget and they're at a different price point, you go, different price points. Sorry, I'm not going to waste my time. And just be straight up about it. But yeah, otherwise you'd be up all night quoting. So, I mean, this just comes back to that number again, right? If you're not winning around 50% of your work, why? So there's two things. You're either too expensive, because why is that? Well, are you just too expensive, or are you just quoting the wrong work for the wrong customer base? Right? Because there's always a tradie who will do things cheaper and is rougher than you, right? And so you just got to match the right customer with the right business owner who's prepared to meet their budgets, if that makes sense. It just depends where you want to play in the market.
Yeah, awesome. And I guess it sounds like you want to streamline that quoting process as much as you can.
Oh my gosh, we can talk about favourites, materials, and
we could talk about that for another hour.
We'll cut it off there. And
if people are interested, we do have a ton of resources around that type of questions as well on the Trade Hub, which is up on the screen now.
And you can hear me.
Something the marketing team take care of with the help of Dan's insights. So fergus.com/trade hub if you do want to have a look at some of the other material we have around running a trades business.
Yeah, and you've got a digital boost deal that you're running, which is always cool. We always appreciate our providers and suppliers when they reach out and give digital boosters a little bit of an injection of something, which is cool, to get them started and get them running more efficiently. And I did pop that link to the last talk in the chat, and I put it everywhere. So if you didn't watch his last talk, I think, did we look at Fergus in that app? I can't recall. I just remember the great. Yeah,
I could talk for another hour on quoting. There's so much more to talk about.
I like the last element that you put there is like, well, make sure that you're pushing your business out to the right kinds of people. You know what I mean? Because I mean, that is like understanding your audience and making sure you're marketing to your audience is essential.
Yeah, and that's complicated as well, because sometimes for example, you just told me you're in New Plymouth, and a friend of mine has just moved to New Plymouth. Now, the one thing is I know about smaller towns, there is not a wealthy middle class. So, therefore, if you say you came from a big city like Auckland and you moved to a small town, you are not going to be doing high-end bathroom kitchen renovations very often. So therefore, right? So therefore, your business has to actually match the customer demands and needs. And you may find out, I'm now going to be stuck doing lots of rental, sort of lower quality work. Yep, because that's where the market's at. So there's that trade-off, right? It's not always pretty.
Yeah, I guess especially because this is the kind of although you can use lots of digital tools to do this kind of work as far as in the background and project management and stuff like that, it's you really do the work where you live versus people who work solely online, e-com. It doesn't matter if I was to live here, I can sell anywhere, so yeah, that's a really good point.
Well, the one thing I was explaining to our team in the UK this week was everyone in the digital world only has a job because there's a problem in the real world that someone's solving.
These are these gems. This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, people forget there's something's broken in the real world that he's fixing, and that's why Fergus has a job, right? Because we're helping people manage something's broken in the real world. People want to buy a house; it's a real world problem, and all these tools exist. All these digital tools help people to solve real world problems, and that's a really big insight when you think about your business, especially if it's a digital business. It's like, what's the real world problem I'm actually helping my customers solve? Because that's where you focus your attention, is how can I help my customers solve that real world problem better, right? Because this is why Fergus is successful, because I focus my efforts on helping the tradie solve the problem for the customer in the home, because that's where the value exchange happens, right? The value exchange happens when you solve the actual real world problem. The thing that's actually broken, you solve that. That's when the value exchange actually happens.
Oh, well, I'm inspired, but I'm also like now going to have to rethink my life. No.
It's the thing when you come off a talk with Dan.
Yeah, you're like, okay, I really need to focus on that. Yeah. This has been absolutely fantastic. I think a lot of times on these chats, when everything's laid out so clearly, there's not heaps of questions that come through because we actually like hit all the points. And we also know that your market is like doing work currently. So but yeah, we had some people joining us on various platforms, which was really cool to see everybody kind of tuning in when they can, with a cup of tea maybe on their break. Obviously a lot of folks aren't working right now, but maybe you're getting caught up on your admin. Maybe that's what you're getting done right now. So I just want to thank the two of you for coming on this morning and delivering just another epically insightful session for tradies. And I think, to be honest, I know it was for tradies, but there's so many things that you could carry into other industries. I think that artists also fit into this realm quite a bit with quoting jobs and, and even knowing your audience and what kind of people are around you that can afford your work. And particularly, I think when you said you go to, you as a tradie, like you do your apprenticeship to learn how to do the trade, you don't do a business apprenticeship. That's the same for so many businesses. Maybe you're an artist, maybe you're in this kind of thing. It's like, yeah, you might have gone to art school, you might be a phenomenal artist, but you don't know how to sell your work. You don't know the first thing about business.
Well, the other thing I see is it's the law of the jungle, man. It's like, if the lion wants to eat, he has to go to the antelope and try and catch one. The antelope doesn't come to the lion and say, eat me. And it's like, if with work, you have to go and find it. You have to go and do marketing, advertising, talk. Like the jobs won't come to you. You have to go and hunt and find and make it happen. You have to hustle.
Yeah, the hustle.
You do.
And do it strategically though, right? Like, I mean, there's that whole spray and pray. Such gross terminology, but it really does make sense though. It's just like, I'm just going to throw it out there. I actually had a guy tell me the other day, he said, people, I often say to my clients, like, who are your clients? And they're like, oh no, anyone who's got money. And he's like, and he kind of said, look, if everyone's your client, no one's your client. Like, I thought that was brilliant.
We're going to run on, but it's a great little story. Illustrates the point. So they were trying to study zebras in the wild, but it's quite hard to study zebras because they've got the black and white stripes. It's hard to study one zebra in the wild. Yeah. So they tagged some with some red paint so they could track just one zebra, right? Track the zebras. Which ones got eaten every single time?
The red ones, right?
Because the lions could focus.
Yeah, that's right.
You could focus, right? They could hunt one red dot. Yeah. And so in your business, if you're trying to get work, you have to focus and go after the work you want. That works. This whole just general approach, do something. Somehow it does work, right? Yeah. But it's much better to be very targeted and go after what you want.
Yeah, there's being like busy and efficient, and then there's being effective, and like that's been drilled home to me lately so much, is being effective. Like, sure, we've got lots of stuff going on. I'm not talking about this, but I'm talking about in general. People have lots of stuff going on. They're doing lots of work. They're really, but they're not effective, in the work. Yeah. So really interesting. Oh, love it.
Quantity.
Yeah. Well, I think that's us for today. I've loved this. So I could sit here all morning actually. But thank you so much guys for joining us. I hope, maybe we can do like another, I'd love to, if you've got time later in the year have a chat about getting you on again, and just some other area that you think, there's a problem out there that you can solve that we need to know about. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's about invoicing. I always like talking about invoicing. How can I set my business up so I can invoice every day?
That sounds really cool. I think we'll have to nut that out.
We can regroup.
Yeah, we'll regroup. Look, you guys stay, I don't know if it's raining where you are, but stay dry. If it's as wet as it is here, I'll tell you what, it's like a monsoon over here.
Yeah, it's blue sunshine in Auckland. I'm about to put my shorts on and a t-shirt and go for a walk.
Stop it. Stop it.
It's really not. I can hear my kids going stir crazy in the living area.
Salt in the wound.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you guys have a fabulous day. I'm going to say ka kite to everyone. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. See you next week if you joined us today. And have a wonderful day.